So the point of today's meeting is to inform and to generate feedback about the government's Simplifying Local Government program. We're in the middle of a 3-month period, at the end of which councils have to submit a plan to government about which other councils they're going to merge with. If they don't do that, I think it's August the 8th, August the 9th, then the government will decide for them. So if this is the first time you've heard about the 3-month timeline, don't worry, there's been lots of criticism of how short it is. The point of this meeting is not to get lost in that, but to move past and look at how we can make the most of the process. It is an opportunity to change a few things if there's things we think we want to change about councils. Another part of what the government wants is they want to create unitary councils, which means we'll be combining the function of the regional council and the district council together. I guess I should just mention, like, regional council do things like environment management, public transport, flood protection, economic development. They have maritime responsibilities like the harbour master. District councils and city councils, they cover our 3 waters, roads, waste, libraries, parks, building consents, planning issues. And that's not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea about what the 2 do. Just to add to a little bit of confusion there, we live in the Waikato Regional Council area and we live in the Waikato District Council area. I'm sure that's never led to any confusion. So that's a real brief summary of what we're here to discuss and hear about. We're going to hear from our Mayor Aksel Bech in a moment, and also from Penny Hulse, who's a former Deputy Mayor of Auckland City. And then there will be a Q&A afterwards, and no doubt when we wrap up the formal event, there'll be lots of conversations. All right, so I'm going to introduce our Mayor now, Aksel Bech. He's just become the Mayor in October last year. He'd previously been Deputy Mayor of the district between 2019 and 2022. Was a councillor before that. He was elected, this is the key bit, he was elected on a platform of, amongst other things, delegating power to community boards and creating cost savings by working with other councils to combine some administrative functions. I believe, Aksel, you'd started work on those things, and then Simplifying Local Government program came into being, so you can tell us whether that scuttled that, or enhanced it, or whatever you want to do. But there's a microphone up there, if you want to grab that, and you can take over.
I will. A little bit of both. Actually, Aaron, we started off with the things we could do easily straight up front. So delegations to the community board. So we've had community boards for, I'm not sure how long, but many, many years, decades, but they were always only advisory. So we changed that in 2022 with some delegations, not many, 3 to start, a 4th to come, but it's to test the system, to test council's system actually at how do we do it, how do we let go and trust. Right, and you'll recall that I talked hello Rachel, we talked very much about the amalgamation of service, doing things smarter, doing things more affordably, not cutting services, but delivering those services in a more cost-effective way. I didn't talk about democratic amalgamation, even though I was asked, Mr. Lawson, many times, but we couldn't control that. That's in government's hands. Next minute, we're doing that as well. So it's all sort of come together, and I see this actually as an opportunity. Yes, it's too fast. Yes, we will make some mistakes because we haven't got the time to reasonably do it. But let's grab the opportunity we can. Let's not have government give them the opportunity to speak into a vacuum, saying that they're speaking for us. Let's get our voice there first. That's what this Head Start proposal invites, so let's do it. And then they'll make the decisions that they want to make anyway. And Penny will talk, I'm sure, about the formation of the super city. And one of our mayors, of course, John Robertson, was the mayor of Papakura, I think it was, at the time of the amalgamation. And he will say, huge process, Royal Commission, all the rest of it. And at the end of it, one strong minister said, no, I'm not doing that, and just did his own thing. That may happen again, we don't know. But let's make sure that there is at least a clear voice from us about what we think should be the components, and that's what this is about. Just before I turn to the presentation, this is my, I think, 23rd meeting, second today. Last week I was in Onofero, and it's really interesting. I was reminded actually that Onofero Nike area, pre-89, was Raglan. We talked about that, I think, Aaron. It was Raglan. It was a northern little tip of Raglan County Council. And the formation of the super city, it became the southern tip of Franklin. And then with when that all, sorry, that was it went in 89 from Raglan to Franklin, and then in 2000, when the super city was formed, it came to Waikato for the first time. So communities are sort of used to government changing lines on maps, and without much opportunity to have a say. And it does matter. Levels of service matter. You know, do local halls get looked after? Does your road get sealed? You know, how does your rubbish get collected? And where we are now in the north, it's a real mess. You know, Franklin really wasn't well served by the way the lines were drawn. You can live on one side of the state highway, call an ambulance, and it comes from Thames, and on the other side it comes from Counties Manukau. Literally looking at each other, you know, 20 metres apart across the other side of the road. It's a mess. So these lines, whilst we just travel in our normal lives, you know, we go the places we need to, we get the services, access the services we need to. It does make a difference. It does matter. So let's take the opportunity. It is the biggest change since 1989. Pre-89, we had over 800 elected bodies of all sorts of things, rabbit boards and pest boards and water management and things and all the rest of it. And we went to 70-something. Plus, of course, the RMA was introduced at that time and created effectively the regional council, split the functions. So we went to having 2 councils covering every area, except those few that were unitary, which just means, you know, one council doing it all. And that's where we are again now. Government, actually of both flavours, have not been satisfied with the way local government performs now. And Penny, who will speak shortly, was part of the Labour government-led initiative to look at what the future local government might entail to be better fit for purpose. National have now got their version of that, largely ignored, I think, the recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry, they were strongly informed, I think is the official language, strongly informed by the findings of your panel, Penny. But it is a completely new process where they essentially said, you know, not fit for purpose, you've got 3 months to work it out. 3 months to do what previously took years and then got ignored. So with that, one more please. So with that, they have laid out some criteria. First of all, you have to think about the region you're in. You're not contained, you're not restricted by the region you're in, but we mustn't leave councils behind. You can't just pick your friends and abandon other communities within the region. And the region as it is now, the Waikato region, is what Noel and his colleagues look after. It's this whole green thing. So that's on the back of the sheet that you've got in front of you, that handout sheet. And I'm sorry, the maps are small. If you go onto the council website, you can zoom them out to get them to be a more readable size. But we have to think about Thames, Coromandel, Hauraki, Matamata Piako, South Waikato, a little bit of Rotorua District Council, just a bit around Riparoa, Taupo, Waitomo, Otrahonga, Waipā, Hamilton City and ourselves. That's the region that's there now. Now, if you've got good eyes or long arms, one or the other, you'll be able to see there's a little tiny dotted blue line on that map. So Noel is going to talk about that in greater detail later, but that's the catchment boundary. So those are the 2 catchments that exist within Waikato region. On the west, everything starts at Lake Taupo and through the Waikato River with its major tributary, the Waipā, make its way north and exit on the west coast at Port Waikato. That's one catchment, Waikato River and its catchments. On the other side, the eastern divide, fresh water makes its way to the Hauraki. So it's quite a different catchment. And actually, I'll refer to one of the other maps you've got on the back, that multicoloured one, that shows the freshwater catchment units that Regional Council use. So with that, thank you, Lisa. We've been given an option, as Aaron referred to, of do nothing, which they've called backstop, And we're not quite sure what that means, actually. They've been a bit vague on what backstop actually means. But backstop is leave it to the government. The other version is Head Start, which is the one where we have to have something and find the light. Ooh. Thank you. But there are some things we do need to pay regard to if we want to go Head Start and we want to put in proposal. 10 things in particular. It has to be realistic. It has to be able to deliver the services that we currently do and also the functions of regional. Right? It has to be able to do that. So you can't have one council or two that get together and are unrealistic in actually their financial sustainability or the ability to realistically deliver what needs to be delivered for our residents and ratepayers. Number two, it has to support the new RMA. It's a bit tricky that because it's those are not enacted yet, so they may still change. But whatever it is, the new RMA has to be able to be given effect to by what we propose. So at least at the high level, we need to speak to that. It has to be simpler than now. So we went from 800 to 70 something. They want that to be a smaller number again. There's an inherent assumption that bigger is better. But we, we'll, we may have views on that. Number four, speaking of bigger is better, it has to demonstrate some economies of scale. And look, there will be. That's the bit that I campaigned on. That in the region as it is now, there are 10 different ways to register a dog, 10 different ways we buy library books, you know. We've got 10 different interpretation of the One Building Act. So when you come to, you know, want to add a bedroom or build a new house, which one of the 10 councils you're in matters. Because even though the one piece of legislation is the same, we've all interpreted it differently. I mean, that's not very smart, is it? So actually on that front, we are making progress, and we've got, Mike, you might be able to remember, how many councils have Craig told us last week? Well, even within our region, we've actually got something like 6 or 7 signing up to a new shared service for building consenting. And we've got Rotorua and a few others also joining. So we're already doing a cross-regional model for that because it's just smarter. We've not replaced some staff recently, about 3 months ago, that left by then entering into a shared service with Hamilton, who have the same functions, again, just to lower costs. Now, the tricky one is number 5, maintaining local voice. How does a community like Raglan, which has a very clear view of who it is and what your aspirations are for the future, make its voice still heard? How do you eyeball your local councillor and hold her accountable for how your rate money is spent and how she, advocating on your behalf, or Noel for that matter, his equivalent, advocating on your behalf in the greater council to make sure that that's given effect to? How do we do that? The bigger it gets, the harder that gets, I would have thought, right? And I'm interested to hear Penny's talk about Auckland, because it seems to me the failings of the local board model is that in theory they could be delegated almost everything. In practice they get delegated very, very little, and it becomes very frustrating for that reason. So that's one that's troubling us and we don't quite know yet. No, you're right, go back one. The last 5, it has to be 2 or more. So it can't be Hamilton saying we want to be a unitary by ourselves now. Can't be. It has to be 2 or more. It has to be at least half the councils or half the population of the existing region, although that one seems to have kind of disappeared a little bit from Minister Watt's recent korero. But anyway, that was the stated criteria from DIA. You have to pick up the functions of unitary. It could be part of the region as well as all of the region, although government's view, I think, is all of region would be preferred. And 9th of August. So those are the sort of high-level principles we have to speak to in any proposal, and we do intend to put one in, unless you tell us not to. So let's go forward. One more. Right, so there's some other things which won't change. So all the treaty settlements, all other pieces of legislation not directly impacted still continue, right? Normally, what we would do with something this important is we would prepare 3 or 4 or 5 options, some pros and cons, some numbers, and then we'd say, right, can you please indicate which are your preferred options, right? And we'd have you can come and talk for 5 minutes and we'll, have a hearing and all that sort of stuff. We don't have enough time. And actually, we don't know because it's also reliant on where other councils land, how they see the world. We also have strong relationships with iwi. We've got a number of treaty settlements we have to continue to give effect to. They're a lot clearer than other councils, actually. They've got some non-negotiables. We met early last week, and the clear message was that the river from the stem to the port must be treated as one. That's the only thing that gives effect to the settlement, the river settlement that's already there. The Turi Whaimana, it's very hard to do when you start cutting it up. So that's one thing. And the protection of Māori voice, whether it's through a Māori statutory board, as we have in Auckland, which I now see one minister at least having a crack at, but that as an idea, or Māori wards, which, as you know, was a hotly contested election issue for local body last time. That is another thing that that iwi would like to see back on the table for the future representation model. But those are the things that we have to think about. Just a little bit faster on the screen. I didn't even wink at you or anything. Right, so we've got just a couple of maps, and then I'll come to what the options might look like. We've already talked about the first and the last. The one in the middle just demonstrates what iwi interests are across the Waikato region as it is. And you'll see actually that that those iwi groupings follow the catchment model pretty closely, which I guess, I'm not a historian here, but I guess that says that pre-contact that Māori lived by the waterways for food, for transport, to grow crops and so on. Makes a lot of sense, right? That's how you'd naturally work. Okay, let's go to the next one. Right, so we don't know what the options are, and it does rely on what others are yet to tell us with a surety. But the options that are emerging most clearly are these first 3, with the third kind of becoming a distant third. The fourth is do nothing, backstop. What I should say too, if you put in a proposal that the government doesn't accept, it becomes backstop, which is back in that category. We don't quite know what is. It probably means government will put those councils with another viable proposal, we think, but we don't quite know. So let's look at these 3. Next one, please. The first one is Waikato region, either as a region or by that catchment split that I talked about earlier. Sorry, I'm in your way. So here we've got the yellow and the green, so a western catchment, which is the Waikato River and its tributaries, and the Waihao Hauraki Plains catchment to the east. So those 2 models are being talked about, and Councillor Noel Smith will tell us why we shouldn't be talking about the 2, but that the whole of region is really the one to talk about. And I would think it's fair, Councillor Kerr, that's also your very strong view that that's the better model. But that's definitely what's coming through. So I'm not saying which is our preference, I'm just saying what are people telling us in these 23 sessions so far, and with the online feedback we've had. That's one. Number 2 is this one. So number 2, one of the things that concerns people is that preservation of voice. How do we protect smaller rural communities from not being swamped, sorry Robbie, not being swamped by the city and their 190,000 people, nearly half the region, population-wise, is in the city. This is one model that would do that. This does actually break a rule, which is that you're not supposed to chop existing territories up. But Minister Watts seemed very relaxed about that actually when we talked to him about it. So DIA say you can't, the Minister says you can. Not quite sure what that means. So the blue blob, and this is the fourth map on the back of your piece of paper, basically is an already adopted, publicly consulted map from Future Proof. So it was done in 2019, 2020, with everybody in the room. So iwi's there, Crown agencies, Crown itself, ministries, councils, various community stakeholders, and then it went for full public consultation, hearings and the like. And the blue blob represents our best guess at Hamilton in 100 years. Hamilton in 100 years. It is New Zealand's fastest growing city. It will need room to grow. It should ideally go up rather than out. We don't seem to be good at that. Now, Matamata Piako are pretty firm that they don't see themselves as being in that catchment, for now anyway. So you might imagine a slightly shrunk version of that being, say, a 50-year view, but we're now erring into a not publicly consulted model. What that does, though, for the rest of the region, which is the map on the right, so I've tried to sort of superimpose the blue blob onto the regional map, it leaves the rest of the region as rural, towns, villages, coastal. It protects us to some extent from the Death Star, you know, that's entered our galaxy. Sorry, Robbie. We think it meets the other, it ticks the other criteria, we think. By the time if you split away the eastern catchment, and so you had the western catchment minus Hamilton, I think we struggle to meet government's criteria, but are we sure they're government's criteria, or were they just what they said the first time they thought about it? No. So that's how that sort of shaped up. Do I have another map? Oh yeah, I think I've got one more map, which is option 3, and that's Waikato, Hamilton City, and Waipā, what we're calling EOY+. So EOY stands up next week. That's our water services company for Hamilton and Waikato District. If we were to add Waipā, given that parts of Waipā, Cambridge in particular, absolutely are in that, you know, community of interest, it would look a bit like that. I think your fellow Tamahiri Ward Councillor is quite keen on that one, Mike. You less so. That gives about 150,000 people in Waikato, Waipā, and 190,000 people in Hamilton. So it's almost balanced, but it is very kind of urban, peri-urban, and I'm not sure what it means for communities like Raglan. That's what we have to structurally protect. Right, so from there, I'm coming to the end now. Just to reiterate the timeline beyond now, so we're currently open for your feedback, please, by the 10th of July. Sometime in July, we'll then hope to nail down where other councils are at, do the detailed technical work to make sure that we actually do tick the correct boxes, but more importantly, that it is right, that we think we actually realistically can deliver ongoing with what we've got. By the end of September, so 7 weeks. 7 weeks they're going to look at all the proposals from the entire country and say which ones are viable and which ones are not. I mean, that's a nutty time frame too. If you are accepted, you then have until March 27 to do the detailed work. If you're not accepted, you become backstop and don't quite know what happens, but possibly you just sit and wait until maybe May, I'm not sure. No one's quite sure. But by May, June is when Cabinet makes final decisions. We have, of course, an election in the middle of all that. Yes. But anyway, this is the timeline. Cabinet makes decisions and they prepare an omnibus bill. So that's going to be one bill that takes care of the entire country that is not currently in a unitary form. I don't know how big that bill's going to be. It'll be massive. And that's supposedly going through a full select committee, public process. And by 2028, the normal election cycle for councils, you'll not be voting about whether you like it or not. You'll be voting for the new councillors, the new mayor or whatever it is, right? So to Aaron's point, yeah, thank you. I've been a mayor for 3 minutes, and I'll probably be the last in the form that we have it. It is likely to change. I think I've got a couple more. Yep, keep going. Right, so I know some other councils, if you hop onto Waipā's site, for example, they're awfully specific about these are the options, please vote. Matamata is the same. They've only put up 2 options, all of region or eastern catchment. We haven't done that because I think it's a bit disingenuous. We don't actually really know. we don't know, and we're sharing the fact that we don't know with you very openly, but we are asking you things like that. And that's what you'll find on the QR code if you go through to the feedback form. What matters to you most about how council services are delivered in the future? We've not even asked about core services. That's the work we were starting on. What are the things that we must deliver? What are the things that you're less fussed about and therefore don't want to pay for? We haven't been able to get to that in this time frame. How do you actually feel about this amalgamation thing? So this is your opportunity to say we can go backstop. We think you should go backstop because we trust the government. They know us and love us. They care for us deeply, and they'll get it more right than those muppets sitting in Ngaroa. So what are your feelings? What are the opportunities? What are the opportunities you see? And Lisa, you've come with a great suggestion about, well, how about we try and look away from the Westminster-only examples? What are some other models of democracy that might deliver something different? What if we go community empowerment up rather than top down, which is the sort of standard Westminster model? How do we do that? How do we find some case studies of that? How do we incorporate that into our proposal? Because we are being encouraged to speak to, or not encouraged, we have to speak to maintenance of voice. So let's be very deliberate about that. Councillor Tilly Turner came with another very interesting idea, which is if we take Tony, where did you go? Tony's here somewhere. Oh, yeah. That idea of community councils, that was in the submission to the Royal Commission way back when, that each existing council, so Waikato, Waipā, etc., elects a smaller number, but nevertheless its own councillors and a community council mayor. How about we do that? So Tilly Turner's idea was, cool, but why don't we do that by interest instead of geography? Why don't we have an iwi council, community council and mayor, a rural, a coastal, urban, peri-urban? I've never seen a model like that, but I want to know a bit more about that. I want to think about that because that's another way, that recognises that if you are, let's say you're a farmer that's out the back of Morrinsville, you might have more in common with Ross, actually, than you do with someone in town in Morrinsville or you in Hamilton. So geography doesn't necessarily equal interest. So this is the opportunity. This is the opportunity to think about that and to be a bit brave and to be a bit radical. Does it mean it will get accepted? Not at all. But let's think about it and think about what's right for us. Let's take that opportunity. What worries you? And I'd have to say the 2 biggest themes that have come through so far, one is protection of voice. The second one is the debt of others. We all know that Hamilton in particular is quite indebted, $1 billion club. They are now. Waipā actually is also surprisingly indebted. For those of you who are train spotters, I've left a few copies of this document here. This is us starting to put together the region by numbers. So GDP, populations, debt, you know, all that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of different metrics in there. So whether you think it's a good number or not, currently our debt per ratepayer is about 7,500. You might think it's a good number or a bad number. Hamilton's is 18,000 per ratepayer. And they've got 190,000 ratepayers, right? So it adds up to a big number. So ring fencing that debt is something else we'll be very interested in. We might see our future together, but that doesn't mean we pick up their credit card tab for the past, right? Unless it's for something that is an asset that continues to be important to people going forward. So if you borrowed money for a new poo plant, well, that should be paid for over time because you get benefit of that over time. Shouldn't be free to people who come later. We should all pay our share. But if it's V8s or Claudelands or, you know, one of those other interesting things, well, I'm sorry, but those were the decisions that stay, we think, with council. And there is precedence for that. That happened with Newcastle, as Noel has told me, when Newcastle in '89, that's Te Kōwhai and Whara, were Waipā and became Waikato District, and there was a roading loan, $1 million roading loan that got tagged and had to be repaid over a number of years. So we can do the same. So those are the two big things there that we've had so far. So yeah, go back one. Sorry, forward. Yep, that's it. So concern about debt of others and protecting voice. Yeah, next one. Next one. Right, so that's it for me. We'll be taking questions afterwards, but that's a really quick run through. I sort of feel like I should be apologising for the speed at which we're moving, but you know, we didn't set this time frame. We don't agree with the time frame. We don't have any choice, and I don't like the idea of government speaking for us. So hence we're doing what we can, and we really appreciate and value the input we can get from you, the wisdom that lies in community, because that's been the whole thing, right? I think our ultimate protection as community from overreach, whether that's overreach by council or overreach by government, is to empower community. Good luck taking the delegations back off Ross and Eloise, right? Good luck taking them back, because the community that picks up that delegation, Extreme Zero Waste, another example, you know, you have a unique approach to waste minimisation in this community, right? Good luck taking that back off you again, right? It's overreach. So how do we cement that in for a whole bunch of other things? That's the challenge. Thank you.
So just to give an idea of how tricky some of that is, Hamilton City Council has their own version of the blue blob, and it didn't have the level of details that yours had, Aksel, but it looked like quite a different shape. And is Morrinsville not in it, Robbie?
I don't think so, and that's part of Tauraki and not the Aksel as well. So. So the councils have got to come up with their ideas all at the same time and then try and merge them. So, Lisa, is there anything else I needed to say? Just introducing Penny, I think. Oh, it's all right. I've got a big intro. Sorry, Penny. So I just wanted to give a little bit of what Penny's done before she comes up to talk. In '92, she was first elected to the Waikato Community Board. I got this info off Wikipedia, so hopefully it's all correct. Became a councillor for Waikato City in '95, became the Deputy Mayor of Waikato City in 2007, just in time to watch the council get swallowed up by the Auckland Super City. Was the first Deputy Mayor of the Super City from 2010 to 2016, and a councillor again from 2016 to 2019. So retired after 27 years in local government. Following that, she served, and Aksel's talked about this, on the government panel for the review into the future of local government that produced a very weighty report in 2023. She was appointed a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit in the 2020 New Year's Honours list, and is a self-described local government geek.
So we're really pleased to welcome Penny Hulse to Raglan.
Oh, kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I always worry, you know, when it's Wikipedia, you don't know what kind of weirdness people have put out there. If it's good weirdness, I would have claimed it, but I'm glad there wasn't any bad weirdness, so thank you, Aaron. I just want to pay my respects to all of you for coming out this afternoon. It is the most stunning day out there, and to come and put your energy and your aroha into your community and into the future of local government just fills me with joy. So thank you all. And I especially want to mihi to Lisa. Thank you for your energy in putting this together and for inviting me here. It's a real honour to be here. And also for being my clicker. Appreciate that, Lisa. We'll work out our little routine. Mayor Aksel, wow, this is the time when you see your elected leaders come into their power and to be the leaders that you want. And you are so lucky to have this awesome man be leading you through this difficult process. There's not a single thing that you said that I disagreed with up there, and I've seen mayors around the country stand up and stand proud and advocate on behalf of your community. So kia ora and thank you. So hopefully this will be useful. This will be a reasonably quick trot through local government and why it matters. And it is that, you know, that parking lot song, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, and sometimes you just need to take time to actually look at local government and why it means stuff. And our community board members, our councillors who are here, you know why this matters, but sometimes our communities forget. Not Raglan. Raglan knows, but it's really good to go over it. So to my wonderful Waitakere whānau who are here, we had our city stolen from us despite the best protests and the Mayos, the Youngsons, our wonderful Di Jennings, Deb. I think we were all on the march together. We tried to stop amalgamation because we couldn't see anything good in it. Because we knew what effective local government looks like. We were part of Waitakere City, Waitakere Council in West Auckland, which had the same vibe as here. We kind of knew what good stuff felt like. I'm not going to go through the slides. This is just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about and how well-functioning councils can deliver high-trust relationships, and they can actually empower communities when it's working well. The main thing is that local government should be there as a conduit, as a connector, and as the vehicle for helping make community aspirations come to life. I trust the radio man to make it work. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. And as we know, at the moment, we are living in crazy times. I don't know whether it's just a factor of getting old, but it does feel that it's more bonkers now than it has ever been. And it is communities, and it is local communities who hold the power to help sort out some of the gnarly issues that our planet, our countries and our communities are facing. Basically centralising everything and having everything come from the centre and large-scale solutions are not going to help solve the kind of problems that we're facing. They're not going to solve the issue of resilience, which is actually going to be delivered by communities themselves with their own design. It's not going to solve the degradation of politics and of politicians that we're seeing. That direct line of sight in smaller units of governance is what we need to make sure that we hold our politicians to account and to good behaviour. But it's not all, roses and rainbows. People are mostly grumpy with councils. They're grumpy with local government. And I have to say, and I'm not pulling my punches, central government of all stripes has done a very good job of making local bodies and local government the whipping boy for everything that goes wrong. If things are not going well in Wellington, they're really quick to point out, well, what's Waipā doing? Look at what they're doing up in the far north. Look at that Mea Moko, blah, blah. it's really had an impact on local government. It's had an impact on elected members, on the wonderful staff who work, and in people's level of trust for local government. But, let's face it, rates are challenging. Sometimes it is frustrating trying to get business done with council, and as Aksel says, when you have to go to a whole bunch of different councils to be given a whole bunch of different information about building something fairly simple, we don't always have people on side. So let's be holding what we might like to change, and that starts to think about that opportunity for what we're facing now. Thanks, Lisa. But we know also in places like Raglan, as we knew in Waitakere as we fought for our city, we know what good feels like. So I also want you to be thinking clearly, what does good feel like and what really matters? Thank you. Because when you get your city stolen, or when an amalgamation happens in a way that is not community run or community mandated or done with kindness and vision, things can go wrong. So I'll just give you a quick trot through. I don't like to talk too much about Auckland, but it's kind of relevant at the moment. So basically the regional councils were embattled with the local councils. Helen Clark rolled her eyes and said, look, this is not working, guys. Let's have a Royal Commission to try and resolve this. So we had a Royal Commission for 2 years who did extraordinary work. We didn't always agree with everything they came up with, but they were just, they were sensible, they listened, they conducted hui throughout the rohi. They came up with 3 reports, the size of telephone books, if anyone knows what a telephone book store looks like. And we thought their recommendations were pretty reasonable. And then along came Rodney Hyde. There was a change in government. Rodney Hyde became the Minister of Local Government, and along came the Making Auckland Great Again. I did add the again because it was just too tempting to do, but the Make Auckland Great document was produced within 5 weeks of the election. It went from 3 telephone books down to about 7 pages, I think, and basically amalgamated Auckland like that. So we didn't have much say. Thanks, Lisa. And that was the amalgamation process. Even though we thought this was pretty horrific compared to what you guys are going through now, this actually seems like we were probably given quite a lot of say. But let's be really honest, the cost of the amalgamation process itself was pretty expensive. It was 94 million that was given as a loan to council. So the government did not give Auckland money. They loaned them 94 million and then asked them to repay it in the first year. The blowout in cost of the computer systems, I mean, that was hundreds of millions. And basically, we've got the complexity that we were handed of the 20 governing body councillors and the 20 local boards. The smallest local board being just over 1,200, which is barrier, and the biggest at 173,000. So, this is not a straightforward process. But there are some good things. So there are some good things on the list. One of the, and this is going to be a bit geeky, I apologise, but at the moment under RMA reform, all councils are being asked to do spatial plans. The regional spatial planning process is one of the best opportunities you've got. And I urge you to have a look at the Auckland plan. Now, full disclosure, I chaired it, so I think it's pretty damn good. But it is a real opportunity to put in social outcomes, environmental outcomes, social justice outcomes into the way that you spatially plan your region. So that is a really good opportunity. And I think whether the government wants it or not, jam that into your spatial plan and own it and do it differently. We were surprised by things like regional environmental opportunities have really blossomed under the unitary authority. That hasn't seen any degradation or negativity. The ability to share resources, the stuff that Aksel's talking about, some of the big joined up behind the scenes stuff has been fantastic. Our independent Māori statutory board, wonderful. We marched in the streets for Māori wards. I personally think Māori wards and our independent Māori statutory board would be a good idea. And the CCOs, so Eki Panuku is the property arm of Auckland Council, and Tātaki Auckland is the economic arm of Auckland Council. They're fantastic and they work well as CCOs. Thanks, Lisa. But the bad is the stuff that everyone worries about, and you're well aware of these. It's the loss of local identity, it's the loss of local voice, and it's the gradual migration of everything to the centre. As money tightens and people try and keep rates down, everything that was out around the edges has closed down and been sold off, and basically, you know, Auckland Council exists within Auckland City. It is large and complex, and it turns people off. It's a complicated thing to try and navigate your way through, and some don't ever look to Auckland Transport as a CCO to set up. Please don't. It's just come back into Auckland Council, but it's a very good example of when a CCO doesn't work. So again, there are lessons. But it's opportunities, I think, that are really exciting. And Aksel, it was so good to hear you talk about that. Change is coming. You know, the status quo is not an option. Local government is in a bit of deep shtuk. It's things aren't great. So we do need to look at the opportunities. And the wonderful Minister Mahuta set up the review of local government that I was lucky enough to be part of. And we came up with, I think, some very good recommendations and some really good ideas about how local government can go into the next 50 years strengthened, because it needs to look at itself and how it can be better. So I do urge you to have a look. Our report is still on the website. Sadly, Minister Simeon Brown didn't like it when we presented it to him, so I'm glad that they say that they've based. I'm struggling to kind of see where any of our report is, but, you know, good on them if they think they have. So I'll just quickly trot through some of the recommendations that may be useful or just get you thinking about what we can change with local government. Thanks, Lisa. So our recommendations cover well-being, te tiriti, strengthening local government, strengthening local democracy, and dealing with funding. One of the most contentious areas in local government, and you will all know this, is, you know, what does local government exist to do? We felt, and we talked with every council around the motu, local government exists to deliver well-being. You know, a footpath is well-being because it stops you getting killed by a car. Rubbish is a well-being because it stops you dying of the diseases that you did in the 1700s. You know, everything is about well-being. It's just how you interpret it. So we recommended that finally governments of all stripes stop arguing about whether local government delivers well-being, and we entrench it in the Local Government Act and we get on with it. We require local government and central government to align their well-being goals and to fund them so that central government starts to think about sensible devolution with funding to local government. Funding. This is the biggie. You can't carry on asking homeowners for rates and expect to pay for everything we need to pay for these days. So funding, I think, is fundamentally broken. Basically, people see their rates, they see them visibly, and they see the increase in rates. They don't see that rates may have only increased a few percent over the last few years, while taxes have increased a lot over the last few years, because you're not there aware of your tax. So we were very keen that local government be given opportunities to have new tools and different ways of raising funds. And again, as you talk to the government about structures, I think you need a quid pro quo and say, if we're going to change and do this, can you please get your A into G and give us some of this? I mean, Ron, you'll know how many years have we been asking for the return of GST on rates so that we can actually spend it back in our regions. This amounts to about $1 billion a year that just goes into government coffers, while you as ratepayers pay all the costs of growth, government gets all the benefit. And that is fundamentally not right. It privatises the benefit and socialises the cost, and that in my eyes is wrong. So I think this is a time to get really staunch about that. There also need to be ways of funding, as I say, the cost of growth, and remove the idea of a rates cap. That is just going to send the ability to invest in infrastructure sideways, and at this time we have never needed more investment in resilient infrastructure than now. Thank you. Into the really challenging one of strengthening local democracy. There are no easy answers here. I really like the point you make, Aksel, about exploring different, be brave and be imaginative about what different ways of that democracy can be crafted up. The way that we deliver democracy now is only a couple of 100 years old. All that nonsense about this being the bedrock of civilization is complete, I was going to say bollocks, but I won't. This is a new construct, and it can be just as easily undone, and maybe it needs to be. I'm really interested in citizens' assemblies, and we've done a lot of work looking at the efficacy of citizens' assemblies that genuinely provide for diverse voices. And I would suggest, if you are interested, have a look. There's a lot online about how they can work. We were keen to lower the voting age to 16, and also, which is completely in the opposite direction to the to the government, we like the idea of te tiriti appointments on councils. Thank you. And on te tiriti, every council we spoke to around the Motu spoke about their need to strengthen their te tiriti relationships and felt deeply that they had a role in that. South Island, Northland, everywhere was the same. So in our report we talked about growing the capacity of councils to have those respectful and good partnerships. And again, as we look at the change that's upon us, this is a chance to really bead in this kind of mahi. And I think this is again a chance to undo some of the movement that's happening from Wellington to undo te tiriti relationships and to re-spark them. Okay. So what kind of system will you build, and what shape can it be? My view is that, and our report, we came up with some ideas. We were pretty keen on unitary authorities, we liked them, but we said fundamentally these are the principles that need to build the system, and every area will be different. You can't have a one-size-fits-all, and they're not quite the same as how the government measures success. We talked about economies of scope rather than economies of scale, so that you don't need necessarily to be big, but it's useful to join together things that do similar things. And we really pushed the idea of subsidiarity. So what you're doing here in Raglan with waste, imagine if that was replicated throughout the whole region, where things come from the ground up, and that's the first place you look. Can it be delivered by the community? Can it be delivered at a level close to community? Then let's do that. And that seems to be a terrifying discussion. I don't quite understand why. So those principles we thought were really critical. Thank you. So there are no easy answers. I'm just saying, don't do a super city a la Auckland, please don't do that. But there are brilliant ideas that you've got. Scoop those together. You've got amazing leaders who are going to help you through this system. But the reality is that basically it's not organisations that deliver good things, it's the people that deliver the good things, and don't lose sight of that. Last one, thanks Lisa. And I chose this because as I've talked to other councils, people have talked about, we don't want to be on the road, we want to be driving the bulldozer, we don't want to be under the bulldozer. And I prefer thinking of it as being on the waka, paddling together, rather than just being kind of sloshed around by the waves. And you have some wonderful wahine toa to help lead and to be the leaders. You've got amazing civic leaders who are in the right space to do the right thing. And I guess just leaving you with the message that don't be bullied again by trying to fit your amazing place into something that you think may be to the government's taste. drive everything that is going to be right for your communities and your people, because actually you are the voice that is going to make that happen, and be brave and be activist. I can't believe I'm having the audacity to say that in Raglan. Go out there and be brave, be activists, but be those people, because it is absolutely needed at the moment, because there's a lot of communities that are not that organised, not that capable, and you can speak for them. So kia ora, and thank you so much. Thank you.
We're going to go into the Q&A part, so if Mayor Aksel and Penny can grab a seat up there on the stage. We've got Noel Smith, who is our regional councillor for our area.
So for those of you who do recall through the elections, 5 times a district councillor over the hill, I think Aksel, you mentioned that, and this is my second term in the regional council. And in that time I've had about 33 years involved in rivers and drainage as a landowner on the Waipā River. So I am absolutely supportive, and having been at a number of meetings with Aksel, he's pretty much morphed our 2 presentations into one, so I endorse his comments completely. The biggest concern for me is the rivers and the catchments. If we do split the area of the region into, say, 3, 4, 5 smaller councils, you then run the risk of having different standards in the catchment. If you had, look at the lower Waikato, that's from Hamilton through to Port Waikato. We've got stop banks along the river, and in a number of other areas, and over in the Waihao Piako in the Hauraki district. If you have different standards, you might have them at 1.5 above the normal river level in the lower end. You might change that to 1.3 down here. So what happens? River comes up, spills over here, protected down there, but it doesn't matter because the water's coming behind and it's coming down there anyway. You've got to have the same standards over the entire reach of the catchment. So my question to you is, if you support a smaller area other than the whole region or the 2 catchments, consider the option of removing the river and drainage responsibilities to a catchment board that delivers those services across the region, rather than giving them to individual councils, which through funding, through politics, through whatever, bring in different standards and different approaches to how things are done. At the moment, the other issue too, which Aksel has touched on, but if you'll see, I think in the pamphlet you've handed out, the regional council, I think we've got about 170 responsibilities under the treaty settlements from the 5 river iwi along the Waikato and Waipā. You split those up, and then iwi get a little concerned. So it's so complex that one simple answer is not going to do it. But one of the easiest options to do is to take the river and drainage out of it, and then you start to look at your local solutions in a much better way. That's in my personal view. This is not the view of the regional council, but that's my personal view. I will say that on record. But having worked in that space for a long time, I do urge you to think about it, and happy to take questions. But I think otherwise, the other 2 speakers have covered things. Thank you.
So does anyone have any questions of our amazing panel? Go on, if there's any ideas or any questions you would like to ask, please ask them now, because we've got Chris. Thank you.
Hey, you might know me, I'm also on the community board, but just to get the ball rolling. Aksel, how much percentage of your district council's budget is used in roads and water?
Yeah, thanks for the easy question, Chris.
Generally.
Well, the answer on water will be not much from 1 July onwards, because EOI stands up and takes the 2 waters, but we still have stormwater as our concern. Mike, you might actually have a better view on roading.
Roading's around 7 mil or up, so that's probably getting halfway.
Yeah, so somewhere between a third and half, I would say, of our total rate take now.
Before EY gets set up under the current today's model,
yep,
shall we say, 75% of your budget is used for water and roading.
Yes,
So
that's fair.
if we just said to the government, you take water, you take roading, you put it regional, and you leave the councils alone, like they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And actually, they've already got regional councils. You've got the structure, you've got the model. Just take roading and water, give it to the regions, and then tell the really small councils to amalgamate. It's, in my view, relatively simple.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I think doing roading collectively will also have some benefits. I don't know, Mike, would you be nodding or shaking your head?
Possibly, depends. Anything can work well if you have the right people. It can also work really well.
What we do know is through the FAR rate is for a lot of our roading projects. So the FAR rate is government's contribution to local roads. So government fully cover state highways and the expressway, but for local roads, council roads, anything that's not a state highway, that's looked after by local territorial authorities, and the government contributes. But again, it's a weird formula. So we are 51% is what government pays us for an approved project on roading. 49% is what we as ratepayers have to come up with. You know, if you're standing, I was in Miranda last week at sort of Mangatangi Miranda Way. There's literally a line on the road that says, "Welcome to Hauraki." It's just a line on the road in the middle of rural, nothing, you know. And it changes from 51% to 70-something% just on that line. And that's because they work in this big algorithm which has got your socioeconomic status, number of people, freaking hotel nights, I don't know, a weird calculation that determines how roading is paid for. Not about, are you building on peat, are you building on coastal, are you building, that's not in there. It's only those other things. So taking roading out, or at least re-looking at roading, is really worthwhile. And you are right, you take away waters, take away roading, and you are left with something like 30%, which for a lot of councils, smaller councils, renders them effectively unable to deliver other services. There's not enough cash flow left for them to sustain other services, and that's a big challenge. I don't think we're quite in that position, and certainly Waipā, Hamilton, and Waipā, Hamilton ourselves are probably the better off councils in that sense because of growth as well. Yeah. It's a good challenge.
Alan.
Yeah, thanks. Just interested in what are the stated reasons? What's the why for this whole proposal? Because I haven't followed this discussion until more latterly. So what's the government said as to why this needs to be done? And secondly, what is Labour's view on this?
I can have a crack at the first one. The other two might have an idea. I think the why is the same why that it's been for a long time. I think government finds local government irritating, difficult to deal with. It doesn't understand why funding is the way that it is. It's listening to people complaining about rates, and it sees local government as part of driving up inflation, and it is often seen as a bit of a hotbed of challenge and diversity, and I think that irritates government as well. So I think they think, chop the number of councils by a third or in half or whatever, it'll save money, it'll be more efficient, we'll be only needing to speak to 10 councils or 10 unitary authorities, job done, and they'll stop getting on with all that well-being nonsense that they get on with. That's just my personal view, but probably reasonably honest. No idea what Labour's view is.
Yeah, you might get 10 Wayne Browns though. Hey. So, which is both good and bad. I mean, let's acknowledge that things around Auckland Transport, for example, he's been able to make some changes there by being grumpy and loud and insistent. But there's a number of other things we might have different views on. We had a meeting with Minister Watts about 2 weeks ago, Alan, and his kōrero on that was it's not bipartisan, but they are bending over backwards to, from his perspective, keep opposition parties fully informed and briefed. In his view, the direction of travel wouldn't change, even with a change in coalition partners or a change in government. And as evidenced by the fact that Labour-led and Labour alone already had this process of reviewing local government form underway anyway. Something like rate caps, very, very popular with the general public. I can't see anybody wanting to say anything different, actually, from a straight populist point of view. And I had a third point, which has now left my mind entirely. I'll hand it to Noel and look thoughtful as I try to remember.
So the Regional Council has been speaking with ministers, obviously, because we don't have a voice in this process officially. We've been told as Regional Councils, you get out of it, let the districts and the city sort it out. But what we've done is we've gone in with support in providing information and the likes. So while speaking with government ministers, we've also been speaking to opposition parties. My take on what we're being fed is that there is an appetite for change, but they are not disclosing what their views are until further into the election timeframe. So there's an appetite for change, but we don't know what their view is. Thank you.
Craig.
Thank you. And firstly, thanks very much for running this session on the roadshow. Really, really appreciate it. You've answered my second question, thank you, in terms of what's government thinking about this and the fact that we've got November 7th when things could be thrown up in the air. How much discussion has there been amongst the local councils? Because I'm cognizant that this has just been thrown at you really crudely and told to go and work it out. But it also strikes me that some might have very differing views, and I'm just wondering about how much interaction has been happening.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm happy to answer that. So we've got a clear, unequivocal statement by Waitomo and Otahonga that they see themselves as king country, that they would open the discussion with Raupehu to, for that traditional rohe. They believe they have a strong and compelling narrative. So I talked about John Robertson earlier. So he's the most seasoned politician in the current mayoral forum, former MP, former mayor at going through an amalgamation and now multiple term mayor at Waitomo. And he makes the point that Rodney Hyde was one strong minister, is happy to just say, this is the way I want it. So, if you can persuade a minister that you've got a compelling narrative, who knows? So that's would be his view, and they've voted, both councils unanimously, just to put in that one option. The Eastern Coalition, let's call it, the Matamata Piako Hauraki are very closely aligned and see their future that way, although both of them leave room for an all-of region. TCDC has publicly looked to Rotorua, which sort of skips a couple of councils in between. Not quite sure what that means, but would also fit, I suppose, with that Eastern Alliance. Taupo spent a long time thinking about whether they were a river or a lake, and have decided they're the head of a river, according to their iwi chair, which fits the settlement. It fits the settlement, Waikato Tanui. So that's about as close as it gets. Hamilton is happy for anybody to help pay for the V8, so they're talking to everybody. That's a bit unfair. That's a cheap shot. No, Hamilton have actually been reasonably open, understanding that everyone thinks about their numbers in terms of voice as being the issue. I don't know, Robbie, did you want to comment at all on that, or you can just shake your head if we move? Yeah, kapai. Okay.
Kia ora. I don't know if this is a question for you, Aksel, or you, Noel. What have you discussed anything with the 5 river iwi in terms of the Waikato River being affected by this?
I'm fortunate in that I chair the Waiora Committee, which is a committee of council, the regional council, and we've got 5 councillors from the 5 river iwi areas, and we've got 5 river iwi members, one from each of the settlement. So we've met. We've suspended our progress at the moment based on what happens with the RMA reforms and potentially the election. But what we've got a clear view from the River Iwi is that they want to see the Waikato River as one. Very clear, and that's where I was talking about before about the catchment. You start splitting the catchment up, it starts to impact on their treaty settlements. And in all honesty, hand on heart, I don't want to go back there because I think we've got it sorted and we can move forward. We should be moving forward, not stirring up and going backwards. So let's go forward as a nation together. And, so catchment-based is going to make it a lot simpler. And that's what iwi are supporting. That's from what I've heard from that committee.
And just to add to that, so we had a combined iwi chairs mayoral forum meeting a week ago, and John Bashara, speaking on behalf of Tuwharetoa, talked very much about Ula River. Evelyn Forrest, I think it is, on behalf of Te Arawa River Trust, very much talked about Turi Whaimana being upheld, no matter the outcome, no matter the proposal. That's non-negotiable. Kataraina from Ruakawa said the same thing, and she went on to speak about Māori wards as needing to be established. In fact, in the majority of that regional council in Hamilton City, in fact, they have survived the referendum or weren't subject to, so they should be there, in her view. And Tuku Morgan spoke on behalf of Waikato Tainui, and he reminded us of, and I'm sorry, I don't recall it in Te Reo, but the second Māori king who spoke about a single reed that will bend or will break, but a bundle of weeds together will be strong. And his closing comment there was that government will always look after itself. We need to look after each other. So one river, one river.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor Aksel. And if I might just add and remind everyone that Raglan, or the Whāingaroa Raglan ward, was the only ward, general ward, in the Waikato District to vote yes for the retention of Māori representation. And we did that significantly. There were over 700 people who voted yes to keep the Māori ward, so we were the only general ward in the Waikato District that did that. So if anyone can, we can, so that's awesome. Fiona, you were sitting there very quietly.
Kia ora, thank you, Lisa. I think I know all of you, but I haven't met you, Noel. Anyway, I'm Fiona McNabb. I participate in some of the local community organisations. One of the things that I'd like an answer to, or even just an idea of, is we've got a fairly well trodden path of representation from community here to our representatives at district and regional council, and we know how that works. So if we think about one of those models where there's sort of all of rural and urban, that's quite a massive change in how we would do that. If we looked at that collective rural model, how do you see representation working from each of the different areas in those models? How will we talk to you?
I was sort of hoping that Penny would grab the mic, actually. Well, this is the vexing question, right? And one of the challenges for me, and remembering the very low voter turnout now, because of that loss of mandate by councils with community, so people aren't even bothering to vote. I mean, we improved it this last election, 30-something, was 20-something the time before. But how do you build a new structure? And the answer is I don't really know. I mean, in that community council, whether it's by interest or by area, that's still representation, right? That's still being the most popular Muppet in a local area. But if you have a community mayor who's elected on the basis of popularity, are they necessarily the ones that should go up to sit on that unitary top council, which is all about governance? It's not about representation to the same extent. Yes, you've got to be conscious of it, but I've got, I think it's about $2 billion of rate take, regional council and all the 10 territories together. You don't want someone who's there because they're relatable on the sideline of a football field anymore. They need to actually be good at governance to be able to mind that shop. So how do you get the people there? Because government's now saying with this other piece of legislation, we won't speculate as to the motivation for it, about non-elected members not having votes. But if you can't appoint them based on skill, how do you elect them? Can you imagine campaigning in all of that district? You'd need hundreds of thousands of dollars to campaign, which makes you either very rich in receipt of a lot of donations, which Winter Olympics, you said that, or you'll end up defaulting to central government party lines. You'll have a Labour supported person, a National supported person, because they need to rely on those sort of putting up hoardings and all that sort of stuff. I don't think we like any of those models, particularly Penny.
I mean, this really gets to the heart of it, is how do you get people elected who are brave enough to stand against popular opinion if it's the right thing to do for intergenerational decision making, who've got the smarts to deal with complex decisions that need to be made around multi-million-dollar projects, and who still do, the kind of mahi that Lisa does in your community day after day, on the ground, having the coffees, having the talks. I mean, the people who do this well are unicorns, and you're lucky enough to have some of them, here in your midst. For me, there's two important things to this. I don't think we should give up on having those people around decision-making tables. The key thing is to actually support them to be the best governors they can be. And I think, and I'm sure as an old councillor, it's the same for you guys, we're always terrified of using our training budget to do training. In the business world, you do get training, you do get development opportunities. I think elected members need to be supported. I think equally importantly, and I didn't mention this in my rather long talk before, but you need to have ways that the layers talk to each other. Where things have gone wrong between councils and regional councils is because the layers don't talk to each other. They just go, it's their fault. The local boards and the councils and the councillors in Auckland don't get on. There's huge tension between the local boards and the councillors, because the local boards can say, we would do all of these wonderful things, but the governing body won't give us the money. There's no accountability for the local boards to worry about what the rates cost are. They can poke all the blame back at the councillors. Then those councillors get unelected and the local board members step up. So I think there's something really important in the design of these layers, that they are permeable, they're relational, and there's responsibility and accountability between them both.
In the design of these models, we've got community boards and what have you, and the idea, it seems to me, what I'm hearing is that we want to reduce the number of cost units in order, that's the government's point of view. The whole exercise is derived from that kind of thinking. And so would we lose our community boards and have much more bigger amalgamated areas by which, Raglan and several other areas would then have to go to get their voice sort of moved on to the next level? Where that's the nitty-gritty is kind of what I was thinking about, more so than the election process. And
I've been involved, this is 19 years, so I haven't caught up to Penny yet in local government. But one of the things that I've taken out of this reform is that the government wants to reduce the layers that we have within our communities. And I know I heard you the other night talking about 4 levels of local government, and that's completely against what the government is thinking. But I look at in 89, we had the town boards, the borough councils and the likes. They were to respond to community concerns. The community boards were created. So you've got them here in Raglan, Tuakau, Ngaruawahia, Huntly and Taupiri. But elsewhere in this district, we've got community committees, and I know I'm over the hill at Te Kauai, a very well-organised community committee, achieves just as much as a community board, and it's sometimes more annoying so than a community board, because they aren't constrained by the council's code of conducts and all those sort of things. What we need to be going forward is sufficient input without so many layers where the message is lost. And it's interesting, if I can just take a moment, during the last election campaign, a lady from Whāingaroa asked me, what's the difference between the region and the district? And I thought about it for a moment, and I said, for me, being a district councillor for 15 years, I was involved in people's lives on a daily basis. Their potholes, their library, rates, roads, all that sort of stuff. Regional council, because it's more in the governance model than in the street model, you don't get the same day-to-day involvement. And you certainly lift up, but there are those who still ring me on district council matters. But it's also having the networks like Lisa, Aksel, Eugene, and Mike. It's having that ability in the networks. So anyone who stands up isn't necessarily going to have those networks, but they're critical, in my view. So it's a jack of all trades, master of none. But you are going into the future when, if the region goes together, $2 billion in income, 1.8 billion in expenditure on current facts, that's a big corporation. It's big business. It's money that you cannot afford to get wrong. So we've got to start thinking differently as we think about what model we want. I don't know whether that helps, but.
And Fiona, I certainly couldn't think of a model that doesn't have community boards and committees. And actually, Auckland has ended up with more elected members, I believe, than it had before, pre-amalgamation, by the time you include all the local boards. Okay, more or less the same. But the problem with that model is that delegation was not guaranteed and funding was certainly not guaranteed. So I'm just wondering whether you could even do almost a mandatory percentage of rate strike, goes mandatorily with each level. That'll be quite novel, but that might be one way to make sure it actually happens, because otherwise there's always a reason not to delegate.
Kia ora tātou, thank you for the very informed presentation today. I value your transparency and honesty. Thank you for the presentations. And it's more of a thought than a question. I can't help but be a little bit cynical given the track record of this government. Do you think that the community voice will genuinely be heard in this process, or do you suspect it might already be a done deal?
Government have explicitly stated that community voice is not actually expected, given the very compressed time frame. I think Bishop's quote was, you guys seem to like town halls, why don't you have a couple of meetings and maybe an online quiz? So it's for something of this significance, that's quite unusual, but it's then on us to decide what we do. So if I look at it positively and put away my cynicism for a moment, Rachel, I would say that I guess they believe that the relationships we have with our community and the ability to get around as we are now is enough. But you'd have to say that if we look at our normal obligations to consult on the significant events, it's not sufficient. It's patently not. I would say too, I just remembered in part answer to Fiona's question, if I may, Toitu Marae is something else that we do that is not done elsewhere, but that connection directly, not with the iwi level. We've always had good relationships at the JMA sort of iwi level, but at the marae level, we've not done terribly well in the past. So that's a new channel we've stood up, and I think if we can use that to infect other partner councils in the future, that would be a very helpful thing to build in as another way of representation and protection of voice. Did you have a thought on Rachel's comment? No.
Thank you. We might
Because you'd be quite rude and use another swear word, wouldn't you?
we might just pop over to Deb now. Deb?
Kia ora, Lisa. Thanks ever so much, folks. Some of it's quite interesting. I guess in the room, who wants to marry Hamilton? Could you maybe describe some more pros and cons of what that might look like for people here if Hamilton and anybody else marries them?
I think, so the answer is, we might need a prenup. But there is inevitably, I struggle to see a future for us in this end of the district, of the current district, that doesn't have Hamilton as part of it. For work, for entertainment, for business, for schooling, for university, for health, we are continually on that road, right, in and out. So Hamilton will be there, but there are a number of challenging conversations to be had about what that looks like. And the bigger the form, I guess that's Noel's point, the bigger the form, the more dilute that power of Hamilton ongoing will be. So.
Thank you. Angeline.
Kia ora. Mine is more of a comment about representation. It seems to me that you're looking at the rivers, the catchments of the rivers for the river settlement. And just probably a reminder that there is yet to be settled the West Coast harbours. They've been ignored for years, but there is a whole lot of people between Port Waikato right down to Marakopa that is a different alignment, and it probably aligns more with Waikato Maniapoto, which used to be an area in the 1940s. So that's a natural alignment for Māori. So, and the other issue was, of course, the Toitu Marae model is not something that we support out here. The reason being a marae is a place where you discuss matters. A Toitu hapu would be more popular with people because they are the people who have the voice. The marae is where you meet to have the discussions. So it's just probably misnamed, and it's probably something to take back to the team to have a think about. And I understand why it's done, because the Waikato Tainui model is based on marae. But it's a Waikato Tainui model for Raupatu. It is not a model that is adopted by a lot of people when it comes to decision making. The hapu, the iwi have the say. Yeah. So that's just a response to.
Kia ora. No, I 100% accept that, and actually you'll have heard me talk about if we do wards by interest rather than by geography, that coastal is something we identified, and Lisa is continually reminding us that here at Whāingaroa you don't look to the river, you look to the sea, and the coastal interests are shared, and as of yet not settled. You're right. So I hear you, and I'll take note. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Kate, you've been waiting patiently.
Fiona actually asked my question, but I'm going to take the opportunity to ask another question. Kia ora for the presentations, really appreciate them. My question relates to something you said, Penny, which is bigger is not better. Bigger has never resulted in better representation at local level. Bigger has never lowered rates. It hasn't dealt with the very issues that people are grumpy at councils for. And yet it feels to me like what's really being preferred and we're being pushed is into bigger. And so either bigger everyone or bigger half and half, perhaps, east-west or whatever, but we're being pushed bigger. So I'm just interested in your reflection on if that isn't always better, then what are the bits we really have to do better on? Yeah.
That's the heart of it, It's why are we being pushed? Are we being pushed bigger? And are we missing anything that might be opportunities for bigger? And I guess, the train has started moving, and this is now trying to find how do we quickly, I'll use another analogy, too many analogies in my head. The concrete has been poured and we're trying to quickly box it in the right direction before it's set. So bigger isn't better, and I think the government presuming that bigger will make things more efficient, cheaper and easier to manage it's a myth that unfortunately we've never managed to bust, and it perpetuates. So we just park that to one side. But it's finding which bits of bigger could be better if we design those bigger bits well. And I think it's taking the best of regional councils and moulding them with, as I said, some of the big pieces of planning that are happening, some of the big opportunities through much more joined up thinking about infrastructure, much more resilient planning, which you can do on big catchment scale. Some of that is better. And then it's almost like the middle will resolve itself. Don't over-design the middle. Think about the really intimate, close relationships that are needed for communities like Raglan. What is the system that is going to support a community like Raglan to keep being as fabulous as it is? So I think, somewhere we can get hooked up in too much design issue, and it's making the most of the really big, making the most of the really small, and letting someone else design the middle. I think you need to say what you want and what you want to keep. And then some of this is up to the government to come to the party and help resolve the middle stuff.
Okay. You okay? Can I ask another question?
Well, I'll just add that in this instance, you're right. I might steal that analogy there. The concrete truck turned up and it's just emptied its load, right? We've got none of the boxing up. So the alternative here is, if we don't get some boxing up, if we don't start to give this some shape, then the alternative very, very clearly is a minister who will just say, that's fine, it was voluntary anyway, so you're backstop now. That's the stark reality.
Just bring you back, before we all panic, we've got to shape up what we think at a high level is what we want for the future. Then we have another period of 6 months after that to get the detail sorted. So don't worry about the detail, have it in the back of your mind, but just who do we want to be friends with? And the negative thing is Hamilton has to have a friend because the government has said they and one other must be an entity. So, just who do we want to be friends with?
Kia ora, thank you. I think we'll, Denise.
Kia ora. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Penny, but I also think we've got to look after each other, and that's about the relationships. So we don't just think about ourselves, but we think about others too in this big picture. But my question is related to the RMA. So it currently sits, between the two, both the district council and the regional council, under a proposed model like some of the two that you presented today. Where would the RMA sit? Because that affects a lot of us.
Who's game enough to answer that?
Yeah, I think we're out of time.
I'll be honest with you, I wrote a paper which I shared with my colleagues, which one of them's friends with a minister, and he sent it to him on Tuesday night. I think the fellow was somebody called Jones. So it was quite critical of government. It's wanting all this to happen right now, but it also hasn't told us the full details of the RMA. And council has got to get on, all councils have got to get on with the business of the day, what we were elected to do. But with everything up in the air, we don't know yet, and we've got to predetermine what the government, there's plenty of indications what they're going to do, and they're going to return property rights and all that. But what does that really mean? So when we get the detail, and the law is actually law, because they tell us to not do this and stop PC1, and I didn't want to bring that up, but stop all this and that, but the law is the law, and so we have to carry on. Tell us the detail, and stop having two systems which are competing, and we don't know where we really are, and we're trying to create something in the vacuum.
And I think, my flippant answer, really is the tip of the iceberg, right? I genuinely don't know. I don't have bandwidth now to think about it. And we've got all this other stuff, of the, I've said this before out here, but of the 35 fast track projects in all of the region, 20 of them are in Waikato District. More than half of those are on Robbie's doorstep. They're on the periphery of the city and would rely on infrastructure from the city. That's nuts. So we have to do that alongside of standing up EY, middle of next week. We're one of only 3 that are fully standing up in the entire country, and one of the other 2 is Wellington, which is pumping raw sewage on the short outfall right now. That's a mess. We've got multiple other work streams associated with our normal growth, and then we've got all this, I'll just call it nonsense, this noise in the machine of things you have to do. We have to review our Easter trading bylaw, this year, I think it is. We've got reserves and beaches that's come back now and has to be. Don't laugh. We're doing the stock movement that mandatorily is up for review. Just not because it's not working, but because the law says you have to review it every so many months. It's all misaligned. We're ignoring the need for a representation review at the moment, which we're supposed to do. But it's a complete nonsense against all of this other stuff, it's more than $100,000 to do it. I wrote to Minister Watts on that more than 4 months ago now, still waiting for an answer as to can we get relief from having to do it. So he's had longer than we've got to do the whole reform, but there's just still not enough time. The audit requirement around an LTP is about $400,000 to do an audit on a LTP. Every council has to do that, right? So multiply that by 67. It's a waste of money because the LTP will be irrelevant year 2 or 3 onwards in a new amalgamated form. Think of the money you could save.
We won't take your question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. Maybe we just don't do it.
Just really conscious, Aksel and the team and everyone in the room. Ross hasn't had an opportunity to ask a question. So, Ross, the floor is yours.
This was for you. I think we probably all agree that the funding model for councils nationwide is unsustainable, and you had alluded to funding models needing to look at. Did your report look at funding models from overseas, from councils maybe in an areas that worked? Was there any work done on that? And if so, could that help inform this?
Yeah, we looked. Obviously, we looked over at Australia. Different models. They've got federal government. They've got different funding models where government funds much more directly to their sort of regional equivalents. It is complicated because not everyone. We can't compare ourselves with what they do in the UK because we don't do police and health and housing and local government. To take it to its most simple form, all that we think needs to change is that local government needs more tools. So things like, being able to charge for bed nights, congestion charging, those tools, and GST, as well as direct funding for the government to set up funds like a climate change resilience fund. It's not rocket science. It simply is government accepting the fact that local government can't foot the bill on its own. So, looking around the world, there is no magic bullet. There's simply a greater shared responsibility in funding what needs to be funded in communities.
Kia ora, thank you, Penny. And the last question will go to Chris. Remember, folks, that you'll have an opportunity to speak to the panel after this. But Chris, the last question is yours.
Kia ora, thank you everybody involved again. Appreciate everyone's time. It's a beautiful Sunday and we're all here in the room discussing local government. My main thought is, do we have the bravery to go back to this government and say, this is the model we think might work, or models, options, rather than saying, let's not pigeonhole ourselves and say, okay, this is the best of a bad. Do we have the strength of character as a bunch of, because there are 67 territorial authorities in a country of 5 million people. It's too many. Like, we can all admit that. But do we have the strength to say, actually, we've got some systems in place like regional councils that actually can work if funded properly? Say, for example, we add 2% to GST nationwide, and that becomes 17%, and that 2% goes directly to regional councils. Do we have the strength of character to say to the government, we have to have some blue sky thinking? We have to actually, you've given us a little box that you're going to pour concrete in, or not, but let's actually, can we approach this and think beyond the parameters that we've been given?
I think we certainly have the bravery, council by council, whether we could get organised in the time available, and there are certain cynics in the room that might suggest that the compressed time frame is to actually not allow us the time to have useful conversations around Orohi as a whole, or the country as a whole. I'm not sure. I certainly think council by council there's plenty of people plenty of mayors who are happy to stand up and put their name to something on behalf of their community that's different to now. Whether it'll actually happen in a coordinated way, I'm not sure. Are you seeing it, Penny?
I mean, ideally, if the mayors came together with a proposal around funding, some of the key things that we've run through, I think it could be effective. It would certainly capture the hearts of community. The hard thing is our mayors and our elected members are so under the pump. Local government New Zealand is so beaten to death. It's hard to find the place, the time, the energy and the collectivity to make it happen. So maybe, it is a step too far. But nothing to stop a good group of mayors like this one speaking out for what needs to be spoken out for, and also to try and win the comms debate. When you say, save local government, we love local government, most people would go, oh, seriously, what are you smoking? So somewhere we need to change that to say, these mayors are standing up for local government because we're actually standing up for our community. Government, you've stopped trusting community because you don't trust local government. Put your trust back in your community, step up, start funding, think intergenerationally and support these mayors. And maybe Aotearoa might stand behind them. But, my sympathy and my love for this group of people under the pump at the moment, it's really hard.
Kia ora, thank you, Penny.
Yeah, we certainly saw protests in the street when post offices got closed, right? I'm not seeing any for councils.
Look, my only concern is that each council's supposed to put in a submission to government. My request, and sort of if I can have any pressure at all on Aksel and his colleagues, is that when you make your submission, hopefully you've lined up our friends in our neighbouring councils that we want to be friends with, and put in a clause at the bottom or a joint submission. We wish to be part of this, not we hope that they will be part of it. It's an individual submission. I want to see as many friends in the same submission. And please choose wisely.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Aaron. So thank you everyone for participation. I'm just going to do another plug. Don't forget to actually click on the QR code or put your ideas up on the brown pieces of paper. And if you've got anyone who needs to be enrolled for voting, go and see the team over there because they're so keen, and they've got prepaid envelopes and everything. So they're already there. And Lara and Michelle, they're down there with the baking. So just giving a plug for them, and thank you.
There's one date I just want to mention, which is 10th of July. That's the right date, Aksel? Yeah, so the Waikato District Council, you can make submissions on the council website, and 10th of July is when they want to hear from the whole of the community. And then after that, they go and find their dance partners with the other councils. Now, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank... Am I taller than you, Lisa? That's surprising. I want to thank Penny Hulse, who's come all the way down from Auckland, and Aksel, who's come from... So we've got koha for Aksel and Penny, who've come and spoken.
I don't need it.
This is worth driving down Fortress.
And so, and the very last point I want to make is that the whole point of today's exercise is that people do go and make a comment. Our councillors and me are genuinely interested. I know there's a lot of cynicism around council, but I can see not just in our council, but the mayors across the region are desperate to hear from the community, and then they want to fire that back to the government if they can. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Ourselves, we're voting for our